Hello, everyone. My name is Marshall Schmidt, and I'm a PhD student at the University of Oklahoma. What I'm going to briefly be talking to you about today is some work that comes from my dissertation, in which I use ACT to look at perceptions of occupational crime, including the sentencing recommendations that research participants assign to offenders after having been exposed to an instance of occupational crime. So research shows that offender attributes differentially affect sentencing outcomes and perceptions of crime. However, research has only clearly identified how certain attributes, such as race, age, and gender, affect sentencing outcomes. Moreover, most research on perceptions in sentencing has really kind of focused on street crimes, neglecting the study of occupational crime, and further neglecting the study of occupational offenders. So I use a vignette experiment in ACT to address gaps in the sentencing literature on how an offender's occupational status, the word used to describe a crime, and the gender of the offender affect perceptions of crime and sentencing outcomes. There are two major theories from the crime and sentencing literature that explain differential sentencing outcomes for the same or similar crimes: the focal concerns perspective and the uncertainty avoidance perspective. Both perspectives assert that judicial decision makers essentially rely on stereotyped traits of offenders that are predictive of recidivism when they arrive at sentencing decisions, and empirical work supports this perspective. However, the theories do not explain how other offender characteristics that are less clearly linked to criminality, perceptions of criminality, or perceptions of offender dangerousness, like occupation, how those sorts of offender attributes are likely to affect sentencing outcomes. And the reason that the theories do not predict how other characteristics affect punishment is because we don't have studies linking them. Thus, I use ACT to better understand how all offender and case attributes are likely to affect sentencing outcomes. So I used Interact in the 2014 Georgia Combined Gender Dictionary to run simulations and formulate hypotheses. From previous work looking at occupational identities and criminal identities and behaviors in Interact, I know that the most outwardly criminalistic identities and behaviors from the Interact dictionary are also those that are highly negative and highly potent. So I used post-event impressions of offender and behavior evaluation and potency to create criminality scores. I reversed the direction of the post-event evaluation scale and added to the post-event impressions of potency to create criminality scores for each offender and each of the offender's behaviors. I then used that criminality score to predict recommended sentencing, predicting that high criminality will be positively related to the offender's recommended sentence. As you can see here in Table 1, CEO has a higher total criminality score than the other occupational identities of doctor, accountant, nurse, and receptionist, the other occupational identities that I've used in my vignettes. So based on these simulations in ACT, I then expect to find that offenders with greater criminality scores will be seen as more criminal, and in turn that these offenders will be given harsher prison sentences. I also calculated criminality scores for offenders' behaviors and for gender-modified occupational identities. As you can see here in Table 2, for all offenders in the vignette, regardless of occupation, stealing was viewed as more criminal than overcharging. Thus, I expect that offenders who are described as stealing from clients rather than overcharging clients, a crime that is more analogous or more close to an occupational crime, while stealing is more close to a street crime, I expect that offenders who are described as overcharging will be punished less harshly than offenders who are described as stealing from their clients. I finally also calculated criminality scores for gender-modified occupational identities, and as you can see here in Table 3, males are perceived of as more criminal than females. Thus, again, based on these simulations, I expect to find that participants will recommend harsher prison sentences for male offenders than they do for female offenders. So I'm currently collecting data for this project. I'm collecting pilot data right now, and then I'm going to collect more data in the fall, and I'm using both a student sample and an MTurk sample. That's really all I have for you today, but if you do have any questions or comments, I'd be glad to entertain them. Thanks.
Thank you.